You know you've got a great supporting cast when you can give any one of the characters a spin-off minigame to call their own. The OG RE4 had a brilliant main game and some of the most fun and rewarding bonus content in history to match. Mercenaries was an addicting, strategic shooting gallery arcade mode where you get to play a series icons, each with their own special abilities, for high scores with a grand prize of unlocking an infinite ammo magnum for Leon. It wasn't until the PlayStation 2 version of RE4 that Ada got her own full-length scenario that she so deserved. Separate Ways serves as an extra playable chapter with unique content, new challenges, and a behind-the-scenes look to fill in necessary gaps in the main story's proceedings. It was worth playing Separate Ways not only to unlock the infinite Tommy gun to complement Leon's gangster fit, but to flesh out more of the mysterious backstory of Capcom's and perhaps gaming's greatest femme fatale. Ada is a very interesting character, and it's not hard to argue she's never looked better than here in Resident Evil 4 Remake. Sadly, she doesn't sound so great, at least in English.
Fly, my pretty. Time to wrap things up.
It's an ongoing debate whether or not Ada's new English voice actor just phoned in her performance, or whether she was horribly miscast. Perhaps both. But what isn't in dispute is that she remains wildly inconsistent and the majority of the time just sounds plain bad. So bad even that the actress herself can't even stand the sound of her own voice.
It's just one thing after another today.
Instead of that virus, she might have needed to be injected with some caffeine before going to record. And that aside, Ada is available in Japanese this time around, where she can look and sound the part. I continue to find Resident Evil 4 Remake somewhere in between a faithful adaptation and a bit of fan fiction. What they've done in changing certain characters' backstories and rearranging content results in a questionable fit. It seemed the developers were strategizing for sections to be replaced in the main game so they'd have the opportunity to pad it back into the DLC. It's nice to see a lot of the cuts reappear in the Separate Ways remake, but I personally would have found it just as well if it had all been kept in the original with no extra changes. The original Separate Ways was short and sweet, able to be speed ran in under 30 minutes if you had everything memorized. The new Separate Ways is a bit longer and more challenging due to tanky enemies on the new higher difficulty settings, made up of mostly backtracking sections where you play the same enemies as Ada, but there are some new exciting additions that put a twist on things, and generally more content is abound for those that want to get their money's worth. The first time's free, that's right, as Separate Ways was included with the original PS2 version at no extra cost. Even though, yes, that in and of itself was a port. Now we have to pay $10 for legacy content with half-assed voice delivery. I also find it strange that they waited timely for the paid DLC to release Wesker and Ada free for the mercenaries. It would have been nice if this content was here free at launch together, but that's gaming in 2023. $60 for the base game, but truly a $70 game with all included. I guess Capcom deserves it though. But another thought occurred to me when I got to the end of Separate Ways, which was that altogether this minigame, clocking in at about 6 hours for a first playthrough alone, is probably more value and content than something like the Callisto Protocol has to offer at a $70 price tag. Not to disparage that game, just to make a relevant comparison. The truth is, the core gameplay of RE4 is so strong that even this abridged chapter is enough to stand alone as a solid action survival horror experience against just about any other game by another developer. Some stray observations. The man of the hour makes his appearance, the ugly bastard that he is. We were worried that he was cut completely, but it made sense that he'd probably just been iced for the eventual Ada DLC. Vertigo/It serves as the sort of Mr. X of Separate Ways, popping up here and there to keep you on your toes, sponge some of your ammo reserves, and tease you for one of the major late stage fights. His new gimmick is that he makes 2 copies of himself, which makes for an interesting pseudo double boss fight, which I think could be good for this series. But it's a bit confusing thematically because it's not clear if we're fighting the Verdugo brothers or simply one half with a clone army. I mean, obviously it's only one that we're fighting, but I think it could have been just as cool if you had to fight both of them at the same time, with letting one escape for Leon to face in the sewers. This was probably the main selling point of the DLC, for most of us waiting to see how Capcom would handle one of the most terrifying bosses in the series, and I'd say they did well with their new ideas, though I do prefer the tension of the original fight a lot more. The scares weren't really here for me this time, and the fight went on a bit too long with the annoying second phase where he morphs into a centipede that just wants to burrow away and surprise attack you with his little bug friends joining in. Wesker gets some new scenes, which I kind of always wanted to see back in the OG. He's another character that you kind of need to use sparingly in order to maintain his air of mystery. He's sort of the evil James Bond of the series, and it makes a lot more sense to let the player go to work as Wesker than it is to try and explain his villainy through cheesy dialogue. He's the kind of badass that you need to play as to understand. Some of Ada's crazy kick animations have lost their kick. The gruesome headshot animations are a big nerf here in the remake, but the new grapple takedown is a nice touch. There are some new merchant quotes and requests, and one that is kind of cute, where you have to track down the enemy that has Leon's jacket and sell it back to the merchant. All of the various unlocks give an added sense of replayability, and all in all, an extra mode to speedrun. There's a lot of stupid yellow paint markings, including some in areas where it is blatantly obvious where you need to go next. I don't know what it is with games these days with so-called accessibility options, but they really need to be more creative than this if they want to avoid dumbing down the design for the player. The added puzzles weren't much to speak of to begin with, so being told what to do in every situation is a little obnoxious. There's even more cut content in the absent Krauser fight, but again, they made it clear that Krauser's connection is only loose to Ada and Wesker in this RE4 Reimagined. I don't have a big problem with it being taken out here, as the game goes on long enough, I'd say. But adding the extra detail of Ada getting her revenge on Krauser for his sexist remarks adds a lot to both of their characters, and that bit of banter is sadly missing here. Daddy Sadie is naturally the final boss once again, and I have to say I don't think he's better or worse, but I do think the original fight had better atmosphere, and at least you didn't have to worry about getting hit through solid objects. Another weird thing that's going on with Ada's character, or maybe it's hard to tell because of the voice actress, but it seems like she's really not all that interested in Leon anymore. Instead of her faking her ambivalence toward him, she seems to genuinely not care much about him at all until she gets guilt-tripped by Luis into saving his skin once he's gone. She has this sort of sudden about-face near the end of the game where she decides to sprout some moral compass and reject Wesker's plans. In reality, we know that the true story behind Ada is that she is a mysterious and complex character, a triple agent of sorts that is known for stringing Leon along and double-crossing Wesker for the secret organization, which they failed to clarify at all in this remake. I don't really care too much for thinking about the story in the remake, and the writers probably didn't either. After all, the selling point is the sex appeal of the RE engine. Overall, thanks to the new Mercenaries characters and the polished gameplay as always, Separate Ways gets an 8 out of 10 for me. It's not perfect, but it has some cool combat to be sure. It's hard to compare to the original since it has a lot of remixes. But then again, the original doesn't have Lily Gal to worry about. Resident Evil fans have been eating good recently, but what we all should be saving our appetite for is Resident Evil 9 instead of all of these remakes.
Better try a new trick, as that one's getting old.
Hey, stranger. So what are you buying?
You've picked quite the place to set up shop, stranger.
Aye. And look what it brought me.
Voice. Copy. Ada out.
Yeah, get her out of here.